Hi everyone, Ravi this side. Welcome to Engineering Adda. In the previous video, we have discussed about the functional interfaces, and in this video, we are going to discuss about the default and static methods introduced in Java 8 inside the functional interface. So let's get started for that. So first of all, what we are going to do is we are going to briefly discuss about both of the methods and their key differences, and then after that, we'll practically try to bring out the differences and see their use cases. Okay, so let's get started for that. So first of all, let me try to go to the next slide, and here you can see I have listed out the default method in functional interface. In Java 8, the concept of default method was introduced in interfaces. A default method in a functional interface provides a default implementation for a method. It allows you to add a new method to an interface without breaking the classes that already use that interface. So the main purpose of default and static method introduced in functional interfaces in Java 8 is to allow the changes without breaking the changes in the existing classes. So let's say you have two interfaces, functional interfaces, and more than three or four classes are implementing that. Okay, so when you introduce a new method inside those functional interfaces, it will affect all the methods that are implement all the classes that are implementing them. Okay, so that is why the default method come into the picture. It allow you to add a new method to an interface without breaking the classes that already use that interface. Okay, now the second point is when you create a functional interface which is a interface with only one abstract method, which is single abstract method, which is like functional interface, you can introduce default methods with the implementation, and you can introduce n number of default method with the implementation. These default methods have the default key before the method signature. Here you can see this is the example. Let's say you have a functional interface, my functional interface, and you have one method which is single stack method. Then you can introduce n number of default method in it, and you can implement it here itself. Okay, so you can see we have created this default method, default void, my default method, and we have printed out that this is a default method. So similarly, you can bring out the default method inside the functional interface, and you can create a n number of default method in the functional interfaces. Now, here my default method is the default method with the within the functional interface, my functional interface. Classes implementing my functional interface can choose to override this default method or use the default implementation provided. So let's say this functional interface is being implemented by more than three classes. So those classes have liberty to either override this default method or choose from the parent. Default methods allow interfaces to evolve without breaking the classes that implements them. So this is the key thing. Default methods allow interfaces to evolve without breaking the classes that implement them, providing a way to extend interfaces without forcing all implementation classes to immediately provide an implementation for new method added later. So this is the key advantage of default and static method. Now, coming to the static method in the functional interface, in Java 8, the static methods were introduced in interfaces. These methods can be defined within an interface using the static keyword. They provide a way to group utility methods. Listen carefully. They provide a way to group utility method or helper functions related to the interface. Okay, so the main purpose of a static method is to provide a way to group utility methods or the helper functions related to the interfaces. Okay, and these methods directly being called with the name of the interface. Okay, the static method in the interfaces serve a different purpose compared to the default methods. While default methods provides or allow you to provide a default implementation for an interface method, static methods are not tied to any specific instance of the interfaces. Okay, so this is the key difference between the static and the default method in the functional interface. While default methods allow you to provide a default implementation for an interface method, static methods are not tied to an in specific instance of the interface. Okay, they are the class level, or you can say interface level methods. With the help of the interface name, you can directly call that static method. They are called using interface name itself without the need for an instance of the interface. Okay, now here is the example of the static method. You can see we have my functional interface, and we have a single stack method, and then we have the default method, and then we have the static method. The signature of the static method is static void and its method name, and then implementation that you want to add to it. In this example, this my static method is a static method defined within the my functional interface. This method can be invoked using the interface name my functional interface dot my static method. This is how we can call the static method directly. Okay, static method in the interfaces are commonly used for providing utility method or the factory method associated with the interface itself, and they cannot be overridden in implementing classes or interfaces. Okay, so make sure like how we can override the default method. These static methods cannot be overridden in the implementing classes or the interfaces. Now, the key differences between the default and the static methods are here. In Java 8 functional interfaces, both static and default methods were introduced to provide more flexibility and the backward compatibility when adding new methods to the interfaces without breaking the changes. Here are the main differences between the static and the default methods in Java 8 functional interfaces. First of all, let's start with the definition. Okay, so the static methods, these methods are declared with the static keyword and cannot be overridden in implementing classes. They are associated with the interface itself and can be invoked using the interface name. While default methods, these methods are declared with the default keyword and provides a default implementation in the interface. They can be overridden in implementing classes but are not mandatory to overridden. Okay. Now the uses. Static methods typically used for utility methods or the helper function that are related to the interface but does not require an instance of the implementing classes. Default methods used to provide a default implementation that can be optionally overridden by the implementing classes. This allow for the backward compatibility when adding new methods to the existing interfaces without breaking existing implementation. Okay, now coming to the accessibility, how the static and the default methods are being accessed. Static methods available for use through the interface name itself. Example, the interface name is, let's say, interface name dot static method is the name of the static method. Coming to the default method, accessible to implementing classes, but can also be accessed using the interface name, interface reference. Okay, uh, like for the particular method, you have to create a reference of the interface, and then directly you can call that default method, which can cause confusion if not handled carefully. Okay, so let's say you have two functional interfaces and they contain the same default method with the same signature, then there is a confusion while you are implementing both of the functional interfaces in a class from which functional interface to call which default method, because they have the same signature, so it will be confusion, right? So you have to provide some specific name, or let's say you want to implement the uh, default method from interface 1, then you have to provide the interface 1 name and then super, and then you can call that default method. So I will show you the implementation, so don't worry on that. Let me try to again read it out for you. The accessibility of the default method: accessible to implementing classes but can also be accessed using the interface reference, which can cause confusion if not handled carefully. Now coming to the inheritance, static methods cannot be overridden or inherited by implementing classes. Okay, because you know that we cannot override the static methods. Now coming to the default methods, this can be overridden by implementing classes to provide a different implementation. If a class implements multiple interfaces with the same default method signature, it must provide an overridden implementation to resolve ambiguity. Okay, now coming to the next thing is the purpose. What is the purpose of the static and the default methods? Static methods often used for grouping related methods that are not specific to the instance of the implementing classes. Okay, so these are the utility methods. Coming to the default methods used to extend interfaces without breaking existing implementation, enabling the addition of new methods to interfaces without requiring changes in implementing classes. Okay, so these are the key differences of the static and the default methods. Now, interface ambiguity resolution. Okay, so let's say you have static methods, there is a no ambiguity as they cannot be overridden, but in the default methods, the case of ambiguity is there. If a class implements multiple interfaces with the same default method signature, it need to provide an overridden implementation to resolve the ambiguity. So it should be overridden very carefully to resolve the ambiguity. Now coming to the next. So here is the summary. This feature introduced in Java 8 allow for a greater flexibility in designing interfaces while maintaining backward compatibility with the existing code base. So these are the things about the static and the default methods introduced in functional interfaces in Java 8. Now what we are going to do is we are going to the IntelliJ and try to practically create the scenario and discuss about the static and the default methods. So let me try to go there. So come here to the IntelliJ and let me try to create one package here. So let's say it is static and default method. Okay. Now allow me to create a interface here. So just create a new and let's say it is functional interface one. This is not an interface like functional interface, it's a kind of interface and let me try to add it and here let me try to create one abstract method. So let's say void test and now let me try to create two classes here. So let's say demo class 1 and demo class 2. Now what we are going to do is in this interface we have one single stack method which is test. Now we are going to implement this functional interface one in both of the classes. So let me try to do that and here it is giving the error. We need to override the method. So we need to implement that method here in this class which is there in the functional interface one. So try to implement it out and let's say we are printing something here in this method. Let's say test test method of functional interface one is called in demo class one and let me try to create the main method here and just create the object of the demo class one and call this test method there. So again let me try to go there. Now with the help of demo class 1 object we are just going to call the test method and if we'll run it it will work, right? So we'll get this statement that we have printed here in the console. So just wait for a few seconds and let's see. Test method of the functional interface 1 is called in the demo class 1. Okay, now what we are going to do here in the demo class 2 is the same thing that we did in the demo class 1. So we are going to implement the functional interface one here and again we have to implement the single abstract method of the functional interface one in this class and Yeah, let me try to do that. And let's say we want to print something here. Let's say test method of functional interface one is called in demo class 2. Again, let me try to create the static method here and create the object of the class demo class 2 and then call the method, which is the test method that we have implemented here. So, and then run this. You will get the same result that we are printing here. Okay. So what we did now is we have created one interface. We have one single abstract method inside it, and we have two classes that are implementing this functional interface. Okay, and they have overridden this. They have implemented this single abstract method of this interface. Now let's say if you want to introduce a second abstract method here. In that case, both of the classes will give you the error. Okay, so you can see this, both of the classes are implementing the functional interface one. So when we are going to introduce a new method inside this functional interface one, both of the classes will give you the error, or all the classes that are implementing this functional interface one will give you the error. So this was the scenario before Java 8. So when you are going to introduce a new method inside the interface, you have to implement it out in all the classes that are implementing this interface. But this is not the scenario in the Java 8. So in the Java 8, we have the default method, okay? And that default method is not mandatory to be overridden in the implemented classes, okay? So I was just giving you the context why we are using the default method and what are the like purpose of the default method is. So now let me try to create one method here again and then try to show you the errors that we are getting. So void, let's say void test one, and let's say now here you can see two related problems. If you'll go there, you will see in both of the classes, this is the class one and this is the like here we are seeing only class one, but yeah, if you'll go to the both of the classes, you will see that you are getting the error. And what it is saying, you have to implement the method that you have included now, which is test one. You can see this, right? You have to override it out. Similarly, if you go to the class 2, you will see the same error that you need to override the test one method here. Okay, so this was the scenario before Java 8. Okay, so what was happening is, let's say you have one interface and that interface is being implemented in more than two classes. So if some new changes are going to introduce, or if you are going to include a new method inside the interface, then all the other implemented classes will cry and they will throw you the error. And you have to implement or you have to override the new introduced method inside all the classes. So that means this is a breaking change. To avoid it, in Java 8, it introduced the default method. So what is the purpose of default method? Let me try to show you. A default method in a functional interface provides a default implementation for a method. So the default method provides a default implementation for a method. It allows you to add a new method to an interface without breaking the classes that already use that interface. Okay, so it will allow you to have a method inside the interface without breaking the classes that already implement that interface. Okay, so this is the purpose of default method. Now let me try to create one default method here. So before that, let me try to remove this method from here and let me try to convert this interface in the form of functional interface. So annotate it with @functional interface. Now we have only single abstract method in it, and now we are going to add a default method. So default, and let's say void, uh, let's say f1 default method. Okay, and we have to provide the implementation of that default method in this functional interface itself. So let me try to print it out here. uh, f1 default method, something like that. Okay, now you can see this. What we did here is we have introduced one method here in this functional interface, and we have implemented it out here itself, and that is why both of the classes are not crying here. They're not giving any error. Okay, still we are able to introduce a new method inside this functional interface. Now if you want to override this method, this default method inside these two classes, you are allowed to do that. Okay, and if you want to directly call this method, default method, from the functional interface in these two classes that are implemented, like that are implementing this functional interface one, you can also do that. Okay, so the overriding is also possible of the default method in the implemented class, and if you want to directly call that default method from the functional interface in the implemented classes, you can also do that. So let me try to show you those things also. So we have one default method here in the functional interface one, and it is printing something, right? It's printing the name of the default method. Now come here to this class, and let's say you want to override it out. So what you can do, let me try to go to the generate, and here you can go to the override method, and you can select this default method and just override it. So here you can see with the help of this, like it is overriding, but it is calling the default method from the functional interface with the help of super keyword. Okay, if you want to remove this, you can remove it out, and you can print something that you want to print. So let's say f1 default method is overridden in demo class 1. Okay, and with the help of demo class 1 object, you can directly call that method inside it. If you'll run it, you will get the things. You can see this, right? It is successfully overridden. Now, if you want to like directly call it from the functional interface itself without overriding it, you can also do it. So if we'll go to this class, if we want to generate it, go to the generate, go to the override method, and let me try to override it in the demo class 2. Here you can see with the help of this functional interface name and the super keyword, it is calling that default method. And if you'll run it, let me try to uh, invoke this default method or call this default method inside the main. So with the help of demo class 2 object, directly call this default method. And this time we are not providing our implementation here. So it will directly go to the functional interface and pick up that implementation from there. So just let me try to run it again and then see. Here you can see this is what it is printing here in the functional interface inside this default method. So this is about the default method, and this is how you can create the default method. And if you are implementing a functional interface in more than two classes, this is the scenario how you can call the default method and how you can override it out. Okay. Now let's say you have more than one functional interface, and let's say you have two functional interface, and those two functional interfaces are being called inside these two classes, and this two functional interfaces is having the same default method with the same signature, then how you can override it or how you can call it. So let me try to show you that scenario as well. So here let me try to create one more functional interface. Okay, so go to this and let's say functional interface 2, and here let's say this functional interface contains a single abstract method, void print, something like that. And let's say it has the same uh, default method and its signature is also same. So come here to this and just print it out. Let's say uh, F1 default method and just printing the same thing. Okay. Now come here to this classes. So let's say we are in the demo class 1. Now let's say this demo class 1 is going to implement both of the functional interfaces. So functional interface 2. Now it is giving the error. Come here to the error and let's see what it is showing. Implement the method which is print. So this is single abstract method, you have to implement it. So let me try to print it. So something like this we have to do. Just copy this and print it out. And let's say print method is called of the functional interface 2 is called in the demo class 1. Okay. Now and this is done. Now what about the default method? You can see we already have one default method here and we have overridden it out. Okay, and that is what we are printing it here, right? So if you'll go to the generate and override, you won't get anything here because what is happening here is this F1 default method is present in both of the functional interfaces, functional interface 1 and functional interface 2, with the same method signature and same thing it is printing inside it. Okay, and in the demo class 1 what we did is we have implemented both of the functional interfaces. So here we have to override both of the single stack method and we have same same default method inside both of the functional interfaces. So we we are able to override only one. Okay, and it is our own implementation inside this class and that is what being called here. Okay, what is the scenario when you want to uh, call the default method from functional interface 2 inside the demo class 1? In that case, what you have to do is, let me try to print it out, sorry, comment it out. In that scenario, what you have to do is, let me try to show you. First of all, let me try to comment this as well. And it is allowing us to implement it, just implement it. And here you can see, with the help of this functional interface name, directly we can call the default method with the cport keyword. So you can see, let's say we are inside the demo class 1 and if we want to override or we want to implement the default methods inside this demo class and you want to implement the default method from the functional interface 1, then you have to call this default method with the interface name and the super keyword. And if you want to implement it from the functional interface 2, so you have to provide the functional interface 2 here and with the help of super keyword you can directly call it out. Okay, now if you'll come here, let me try to print this and then show you. You can see you're getting the same result here. So this is this is to avoid the ambiguity. You can directly put the name of the functional interface from which you want to call the or you want to override the default method. Similar thing you can do here for the demo class 2. uh, let's say this demo class 2 is also implementing the functional interface 2 and again you have to override the print and let's say the print is printing something. Okay, now here you can see we have already overridden the default method and the default method is being called from the functional interface 1. Okay, if you want to do the changes you can come here to the default method of it and let's say you want to print something here and come here to the default method of the functional interface 2 and print something here. Let's say it is printing F2 default method, and functional interface default method is printing F1 default method. Now, if you'll go to the demo class 2, let's say demo class 2 is calling the F1 default method and demo class 1 is calling the F2 default method. Okay, and if you'll run this demo class 2, let me try to run it and then show you. So it is printing F2 default method, and if you'll come here to the demo class 2 and if you'll run it, it will print the F1 default method. So this is to avoid the ambiguity, and if you have more than two functional interfaces. Okay, so this is about the functional interface and the default method inside the functional interface, their purpose and how to call them and how to write them. Okay, so those are the things we have discussed here. Now coming to the static method. Now let me try to remind you the purpose of the static method. So here you can see the Java 8 static methods were introduced in the interfaces. These methods can be defined within an interface using the static keyword. They provide a way to group utility methods or helper function related to the interface. So they provide a way to group utility methods or the helper function related to the interface. A static method in interfaces serves a different purpose compared to the default methods. While default methods allow you to provide a default implementation for an interface method, static methods are not tied to any specific instance of the interface. Okay, they are called using the interface name itself without the need for an instance of the interface. So when we are calling the default method, you can see with the help of the object we are calling that, or with the help of the super keyword we were calling that default method. But this is not the case of the static method. With the help of this interface name, we can directly call the static method inside that interface. So this is not related to any instance. This is related to the class or interface. So how we can develop that? Let me try to show you again. You can see with the help of static and then the return type of that method and the method name. Inside that, if you want to provide some implementation, you can provide it. So just allow me to develop the static method and then try to show you how you can call it. So let's say we are inside the functional interface one, and here we want to create one static method. So you have to provide the static, and let's say the return type of that method is void, and let's say static demo method, something like that, or static method demo. And let's say it is printing static method demo in functional interface one. Okay. Now let's say you want to call this static method inside the demo class one. So how you can do that? You can directly come here to the main, and with the help of this functional interface one, you can directly call that static method here. And if you run it, you will get the result here. You can see static method demo in functional interface one. So this is how you can write the static method, and this is how you can call the static method. And basic difference between the static and the default method we already have covered. And you can see this. These are some key differences. I already have covered it out. Okay, so this is about the static and the default method of Java 8. In the coming videos, we'll cover the method references and the others related topics of the Java 8. Okay, so thanks for the support and please subscribe the channel for more such content. Thanks.